Close your eyes and let the roar of those early jet engines carry you back to London in the 1930s. Do you remember the sense of awe at the gleaming white glass cities of Everytown, or the shadows of gigantic aircraft blotting out the sky? Those were the images that once made us dream of a future filled with hope. But be careful, because behind those iconic frames lie truths that will send chills down your spine. Can you believe that when audiences in 1936 sat in theatres watching London being flattened on screen, they had no idea that just 4 years later, real bombs would fall on those very same places? Or that our dignified leading hero would calmly order the shooting of innocent citizens simply because they had contracted a strange disease? And even the cast themselves were forced to endure rigid plastic costumes that felt like torture, causing them to faint right on the set under the authoritarian eye of writer H.G. Wells. So set reality aside for a moment as we uncover the 15 darkest and most chilling secrets behind the science fiction masterpiece Things to Come. 15. A bloody prophecy of World War II. Let us rewind to an autumn afternoon in 1936, when horse-drawn carriages still clattered along the streets of London, and the peaceful air of Europe seemed untouched by the smell of gunpowder. In the darkness of the cinema, audiences held their breath as they watched black and white images of a distant future, where the sky thundered with engines and entire cities were flattened beneath relentless waves of bombs. They saw it as exaggerated science fiction, a distant nightmare existing only in the imagination of writer H.G. Wells. Yet what no one realised at the time was that the film was, in a terrifying sense, a prophecy written in blood. Things to Come predicted that a global war would erupt in 1940, only 1 year off from the actual outbreak in 1939. But the most chilling accuracy lay in how that destruction would unfold. Wells correctly envisioned the concept of carpet bombing civilian populations, a brutal military strategy that had virtually no precedent at the time. As London audiences sat in those theatres, they had no idea that just 4 years later, the very cinemas and streets around them would be consumed in the real-life bombing campaign known as the Blitz. The most horrifying feeling is not simply seeing the future on screen, it is realising that the future is already knocking at your door with unimaginable force. In the end, the film became a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest fears, where the boundary between fiction and reality dissolved beneath the thunder of falling bombs. 14. The nightmare called the White Death. I still remember how Things to Come planted a deep subconscious terror through the concept of the wandering sickness. Imagine your loved ones one day becoming hollow shells, their eyes empty, as they begin wandering aimlessly through the ruins of civilization until they collapse from exhaustion. It is one of the cruelest metaphors for the total collapse of human society, where families no longer exist, laws have vanished, and all that remains are ghost-like figures drifting beneath a grey and lifeless sky. But the moment that truly shatters our faith in humanity lies in how the supposed heroes of the film respond to this epidemic. In a world ruled by cold logic, the character John Cabal makes a decision so ruthless that it leaves viewers stunned. He orders that infected individuals be shot on sight to prevent the disease from spreading. There are no attempts at treatment, no emergency hospitals, only gun barrels and quiet executions. This detail sparked fierce ethical debates about biomedical morality. It reflects the chilling influence of eugenic thinking and social Darwinism, where the death of individuals is treated as an acceptable sacrifice for the survival of the species. When audiences watch that scene, they are not only afraid of the disease, they are even more afraid of a future where humanity might abandon compassion in exchange for the cold efficiency of survival. 13. Future costumes, the armor that tortured actors. Few people realize what the actors had to endure in order to portray the so-called mechanical gods of the future. According to those who were present on the set at the time, the costumes were not symbols of elegance, they were a genuine nightmare. H.G. Wells had a peculiar obsession. He despised anything that looked like cheap alien costumes. He wanted the humans of the future to possess the rigid beauty of machines. As a result, elaborate outfits with massive synthetic plastic shoulder pieces were created. But imagine wearing those early plastic designs beneath the blazing studio lights of the 1930s. The suits effectively became portable furnaces. Actors struggled to breathe inside them while the sharp edges of the hard plastic constantly scratched and dug into their skin whenever they moved. Numerous performers reportedly collapsed from exhaustion and heat right on the set. Yet Wells remained coldly determined the costumes would not be changed. To him, visual perfection mattered more than the comfort or even safety of the people wearing them. Those majestic strides you see on screen were in reality steps taken through intense discomfort and pain. 12. When science becomes dictatorship. If you have ever dreamed of a golden age where the wisest minds guide humanity out of darkness, Things to Come delivers a brutal awakening from that dream. For many fans of classic science fiction, the organization Wings Over the World appears as humanity's final beacon of hope after decades of chaos. They arrive in giant aircraft, restoring order to the world with what the film calls peace gas. But when we revisit the story through modern eyes, a far more unsettling message begins to emerge. This is not liberation. It is a coup of knowledge against freedom. The leaders of the organization declare that scientists alone deserve to rule, replacing democracy, which they dismiss as weak and outdated. Anyone who resists, whether out of faith culture or the desire to preserve individual identity, is labeled backward and an enemy of progress. The story ultimately ends with humanity accepting a form of technocratic totalitarianism where decisions are made in sterile laboratories rather than open debate. Many later critics shuddered at the realization that the film almost resembles propaganda for a scientific dictatorship. It imagines a utopia where people possess abundant food and technology, yet quietly lose the most personal thing of all, their individual voice. In this world, progress is not built on compassion, but on the cold authority of iron wings. 11. Peace gas and the painful memory of poison gas. Do you remember the chilling sensation of watching thick white clouds slowly descend from the sky, swallowing an entire city, already drowning in chaos? For many audiences at the time, the scene where the scientific faction releases sleeping gas from aircraft to restore order did not feel like a moment of relief or salvation. Instead, it felt like the ghost of a recent and painful past returning. In 1936, the world was still bleeding from wounds that had barely begun to heal after World War I. Against that haunting backdrop, the film placed viewers before a troubling paradox: thousands of civilians quietly collapsing in the streets described in the film as a humane solution to end war. The image of people, fathers, mothers, and innocent children rushing through crowded streets only to suddenly drop their arms and fall motionless beneath drifting clouds of gas struck viewers with unsettling force. The moment an entire living city is neutralized within minutes was not merely a cinematic spectacle. It echoed the traumatic memory of chemical warfare, where humanity itself could be erased in a single breath. Many viewers felt deeply uneasy, even angered by the idea that a weapon capable of disabling entire populations could be dressed up as a symbol of progress and peace. It raised a disturbing ethical question. Can something truly be called humane when it strips millions of people of control over their bodies and their will? with the press of a single button from the sky. 10. The Nightmare, born from H.G. Wells's ego. Few people realise how tense the atmosphere behind the scenes of Things to Come truly was. People often say that a film is the creative child of its director. But in this case, the production became something closer to an arena of clashing egos. Writer H.G. Wells did not stop at writing the screenplay. He wanted every frame of the film to serve as a personal lecture reflecting his own ideas about the future. He interfered aggressively in nearly every aspect of production, from the design of the smallest props to dictating exactly how actors should move in order to embody what he believed was the correct future posture. This constant intervention turned the filming process into a genuine nightmare for director William Cameron Menzies and producer Alexander Korda. Wells's authoritarian approach created an atmosphere that often felt emotionally on the verge of collapse. When the film was finally released, it carried a tone that many viewers found strangely dry and rigid. Instead of a sweeping and inspiring spectacle, the film often resembled a cold philosophical essay, one that reflected Wells's rather pessimistic view of human nature. Talented actors appeared less like fully realised characters and more like figures being manoeuvred across a stage by the demanding vision of Wells himself. Ironically, this overwhelming level of control may have unintentionally suffocated the emotional soul of the film. What remained was a visually monumental production, yet one that sometimes lacked the warm human pulse that allows audiences to truly connect with the story. 9. Blood and Tears beneath the city of Everytown. In our memories, Everytown appears as a breathtaking wonder of the future. Its gleaming glass architecture and vast open spaces radiating technological grandeur. But behind that dazzling vision lies a painful truth carefully buried beneath the rubble of history. In 1935, while the film crew was constructing the enormous set meant to represent this futuristic city, a violent storm suddenly struck the production site. The sheer force of nature caused a portion of the Everytown set to collapse completely, turning the construction area into a scene of tragedy. One worker was killed instantly, and several others suffered serious injuries in the devastating accident. Real blood was spilled in the effort to create the illusion of a perfect future world. The incident deeply shook the entire production team and cast a lingering shadow over the filmmaking process. So whenever we look back at the magnificent images of Everytown on screen, it is worth remembering that they were not created solely from plaster light and imagination. They were also built upon the quiet sacrifices and suffering of the people working behind the camera. In a tragic irony, Everytown, the symbol of humanity's triumphant future, was constructed upon the fragile reality of human loss, the very vulnerability that the film itself hoped science would one day overcome. 8. The ideological clash with Metropolis. I still vividly remember the overwhelming sight of the colossal gears and the suffering working class in Fritz Lang's masterpiece Metropolis. In the memory of most film lovers, it stands as an untouchable monument of early science fiction cinema. Yet to H.G. Wells, it was something else entirely, a thorn that had to be pulled out. Before production on Things to Come even began, Wells reportedly gathered the entire creative team and declared with unmistakable irritation that he deeply despised Lang's film. He even mispronounced the German director's name as Langer, seemingly as a way to express his contempt. Wells instructed the crew to do the complete opposite of what Fritz Lang had done. If Metropolis was filled with roaring machines and the tragic emotions of humanity, then Wells wanted Things to Come to be clean, cold, and strictly rational. His dislike ran so deep that he suppressed almost every abstract artistic idea proposed by the filmmakers, replacing them with lectures about logic and technological order. In the end, this was not merely a rivalry between two films, it was a clash between two visions of the future. One believed in the power of the human heart. The other, Wells's vision, placed its faith entirely in the authority of numbers machines and engineering diagrams. 7. A pessimistic ending disguised as progress. Many of us probably remember the suffocating tension of the film's final scene, when the massive spacecraft prepares to launch humanity toward the moon. Amid the cheers of rebellious crowds, demanding that progress be halted so they can return to a simpler life, the character John Cabal delivers a line that leaves audiences stunned. Mankind must go on or perish. For many viewers at the time, this felt like one of the most bleak and ruthless endings in early science fiction history. Beneath the hopeful imagery of space exploration lies a far colder message: scientific progress outweighs the will of the people. Wells seems to suggest that anyone who stands in the way of the future, whether motivated by fear, doubt, or even compassion, may ultimately be swept aside. Many later critics described this ending as carrying the spirit of social Darwinism, a harsh form of natural selection, in which those considered intellectually weak are crushed beneath the unstoppable machinery of civilization. What appears to be a triumphant invitation to explore the universe may actually be something far more unsettling. Not an invitation, but a command. Advance or disappear. 6. The shadow of Benito Mussolini. In the memory of many viewers, the character known simply as the boss of Everytown appears to be a relic of a collapsing world, a tyrant desperately clinging to power as civilization crumbles around him. But there is a behind-the-scenes revelation that changes the way we see this character entirely. Actor Ralph Richardson later admitted that he intentionally modelled his authoritarian performance on a real-life figure who was terrifying Europe at the time, Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini. The significance of this choice becomes clear when we remember that the film was produced in 1935, at a moment when fascism was rapidly expanding across Europe. Mussolini's presence dominated international politics, and his bombastic speeches and theatrical posture had already become infamous. Richardson subtly incorporated those traits into his performance, the arrogant gestures, the grandiose rhetoric, and the rigid stance that mirrored Mussolini's public persona. This was not merely an acting choice, it was a warning about the seductive nature of absolute power. Seen through this lens, Everytown is no longer just a fictional city of the future. It becomes something more unsettling, a reflection of the real political forces rising in the world at that very moment. Even within dreams of technological progress, the shadow of dictatorship was already waiting. 5. A mirror of the future, the impossible flat screen. Have you ever wondered how a film made in the era of vacuum tube radios could imagine technology that resembles the 21st century so closely? For audiences of the 1930s, the very idea of television was still a rare and experimental novelty. Yet, if you look carefully at the world of Everytown, you will notice a detail that still amazes modern technology enthusiasts. The film predicted the existence of large, wall-mounted flat display screens devices remarkably similar to the LCD televisions and giant digital displays we know today. In 1936, real televisions were bulky machines with tiny screens barely larger than the palm of a hand. But in Wells's vision, enormous panels broadcast information to entire communities like glowing technological mirrors. This detail was more than just an imaginative prop. It was a vision that seemed to leap decades ahead of its time. a glimpse of a world where humanity would eventually live surrounded by sleek, flat surfaces of digital light, constantly delivering images, information and messages to our everyday lives. What seemed impossible in the 1930s would one day become ordinary. 4. The strange coincidence and H.G. Wells's birthday gift. I still remember the eerie feeling when some film historians discovered a tiny detail hidden on a newspaper shown briefly in the scene where the long war finally ends. Do you believe in the strange arrangements of fate? In the film, the date marking the return of peace after decades of destruction is printed clearly on the newspaper, September the 21st, 1966. What makes this detail so chilling is that September 21st, 1966 is also the exact 100th anniversary of H.G. Wells's birth. This coincidence was not accidental. It feels almost like a final signature left by the brilliant yet controversial writer himself. Wells seemed to want his centennial birthday to be symbolically tied to the rebirth of humanity on screen. At the same time, it reminds the audience that this entire imagined future, whether glorious or drenched in blood, exists within the creative design of a single man, one who used his pen to shape the flow of history according to his own vision. 3. The glass prison and the audience's alienation. Even if you try to imagine a cinematic spectacle funded with a staggering budget of £260,000, an almost unimaginable sum, in 1936, it is still difficult to believe that the film was met with such bitter reactions. In the memory of critics at the time, Things to Come did not inspire hope. It inspired unease. In the United States in particular, the film faced fierce criticism and was accused of promoting scientific totalitarianism. Audiences felt uneasy and disconnected from the vision of Everytown, which appeared too clean, too white, and too sterile. They saw no warmth of family life there, no awkward but genuine human emotions. Instead of a paradise on Earth, many viewers felt that Everytown resembled a glass prison, a place where human beings were watched over by scientists and stripped of the right to make mistakes. This chilly reception became proof of something important. Sometimes technological progress, when stripped of compassion, creates not a hopeful future, but a dazzling world that feels terrifyingly cold. 2. The March of Doom. Even now, I can still remember the pounding, ominous rhythm of the score march of the Things to Come. There is something extremely rare about its creation in film history. Composer Arthur Bliss completed much of the music before the final scenes of the film were even finished. H.G. Wells wanted the music to be more than background sound. To him, it had to function as a living character, one capable of tightening the audience's chest with the looming terror of war. Whenever the march played in theatres, it felt as if a colossal war machine was slowly grinding everything beneath its feet. Its relentless, almost mechanical rhythm caused many viewers at the time to admit that they broke into cold sweat while sitting in their seats. Bliss's music did not promise peace. Instead, it sounded like a warning, a future where the roar of engines and the thunder of bombs would replace songs and laughter. It was a deeply haunting auditory experience, planting in the audience a sense of humanity's inescapable fate. 1. A box office failure and a resurrection from the ashes. For film distributors, in 1936, Things to Come was considered a major financial disappointment. Despite being one of the most ambitious and expensive productions of its time, the film was met with a surprisingly cold response when it premiered. Audiences of the 1930s, many of whom were still struggling through the Great Depression, simply were not ready to embrace such a bleak and pessimistic vision of the future. They were searching for comfort and hope, but Wells offered them a stern lecture about destruction and the dominance of machines. Yet time often proves to be the fairest judge. After decades of relative obscurity, Things to Come eventually experienced a powerful rediscovery and is now widely recognized as a pioneering work of dystopian science fiction. Critics and historians began to realize that what audiences once rejected as too heavy was actually Wells's brutally honest reflection on the nature of humanity itself. From a commercial failure, the film transformed into a priceless legacy. A reminder that sometimes the movies rejected in their own time are the ones that speak most truthfully about the future. After exploring these 15 haunting facts, do you still see Everytown as a shining paradise of the future? Or is it merely a dazzling glass prison built upon bloody prophecies and cold visions of progress? Things to Come is more than just a film. It is a warning sent from the past to our present. Scientific progress is essential, but without compassion, the price we pay may be the very soul of humanity. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so we can uncover more shocking cinematic secrets together. And now, a question for you. If you had to choose between a chaotic world full of human warmth and a perfect but emotionless future, which side would you take? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Goodbye for now, and see you again in the next chapter of our cinematic memories.